He came up out of the fog like wet paper being peeled off a cold stone wall. That's the only way I ever could describe it to anybody who wasn't there. Like something that had been pressed flat, pressed under the weight of all that white mist for days, until the shape of him wasn't quite right no more. His fingers was too long. His neck tilted at an angle no neck ought to tilt at. And when the boy reached out and touched his father's face, it felt like limestone, cold and damp and faintly gritty, like the mountain itself had been trying to absorb him. The winch on that cliff screamed, iron on iron, rust scraping rust, and the cable pulled taut as a fiddle string in January. And something else came up with him, something that had been in those deep fog pools a whole lot longer than any man ought to be. Stay under your quilt now. We'll get to it. This is case file 084, the fog dredger of Omen Ridge. Before I can tell you about the captain, I gotta tell you about the fog. If you don't understand the fog the way the old-timers understood it, the way people born in these hollers understood it in their bones, then nothing that follows is gonna make sense. Most folks from the flatlands think of fog as weather. They say it'll burn off by 9. They say it's atmospheric moisture. In the flatlands, reckon they're right enough. But up here on the high limestone ridges, up where the Appalachians get old and gray and mean, the fog is something else entirely. The mountain people called it the air river, not cloud, not mist. A river, because it moves like one. It has a current. You stand on the edge of a ridge at first light, that time we call the twilight, when the dark and the day are still arguing, and you watch the fog come rolling through the gaps in the rock, and you'll see it. The way it eddies around a boulder, same as water does. The way it pools in the limestone sinks and old quarry cuts, deep and still and perfectly, terribly still. The way it rushes through the narrow cuts between ridges, hard enough to snatch a hat off your head. Some mornings it comes thin and fast, and you can walk right through it and feel nothing but damp. Other mornings, the old-timers call these the heavy mornings. It comes in thick and close, and it presses against your skin like wet wool, and every sound around you goes flat and dead, like you've put your head under a feather tick. Those are the mornings you stay inside, because the heavy fog has deep pools in it, A river has shallows you can wade, and it has deep holes where the current goes cold and dark at the bottom. Holes where a man can lose his footing and not come back up. The air river has the same. The deep fog pools sit in the limestone hollows and cliff-bottom places where the sun don't reach until 10 in the morning, if it reaches at all. And in those pools, the old-timers said, and I believe 'em, time moves different. Not stopped, just slowed, like cold molasses, like a clock running on a weak spring. A dog might wander into a deep fog pool on a Thursday and come out the next, skinny and confused and smelling of wet iron. A child might step off a path in the fog and step back onto it 3 hours later, even though her mother swore she'd been calling that name for 6. And occasionally, not often, but occasionally, something that went into a deep fog pool didn't come back out at all. Not right away. Not in a way you'd fully recognize. The fog holds things, you see, not just lost people. The mountain is ancient, older than any name we ever put on it. And over the centuries there is an accumulation, a grief weight. A Civil War soldier who took a wrong turn in the whiteout and never found his regiment. A woman who walked out to fetch water one December morning and was never seen again. Toys, tools, livestock, whole families, swallowed since long before anybody alive today was born. The fog holds 'em, keeps 'em pressed flat in those cold pools like flies in amber, suspended under the weight of all that white air, waiting for something to come down and pull 'em up. That's where the captain comes in. His name by the record was Elias Cormac Pruitt. He'd spent 43 years on the Ohio and the Kanawha running dredging operations, pulling sand and lost cargo from the river bottoms with cable and winch rigs the size of small houses. When his knees gave out and the company pensioned him off, Captain Pruitt came back to the mountain he'd been born on, back to Oman Ridge, above the big holler the county maps call Creel's Gap, but which local people just call the Bottom, on account of how long the fog pools in it come morning. He brought his winch with him, took 6 men and a flatbed truck and most of one August day to haul that iron machine up the switchback road. Neighbors watched and didn't say much, because people on the ridge have learned you let a man do what he's fixin' to do, and you wait. He bolted it to the limestone shelf at the very edge of Oman Ridge, where the cliff drops 200 feet straight down into the bottom. anchored it with iron pins sunk 2 feet into rock, ran his cable, 3-inch braided steel, out over the edge and down into the fog. And he went to work. Neighbors heard it before they saw it. The low groan of iron gears, the cable under tension, the slow mechanical heartbeat of the drum rollin', click, 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 in the before-dawn dark. Most left into it, but some, the ones with enough mountain blood to feel a thing before they understand it, started coming up to watch, because the captain was pulling things up. He kept a log, careful and meticulous, same as on the river. Date, time, cable depth, description of item. I have read that log cover to cover. Here are 4 entries I want you to carry with you. The first was a bugle. Brass once. What came up on that cable was the color of old bone, and it dripped cold water that had no business being there on a dry September morning. An insignia stamped into the bell was later identified as a Union regiment that marched this stretch of ridge in the fall of 1863. The captain set it on his table without speaking. The water it dripped pooled on the limestone and didn't evaporate. 3 days later it was still wet, still cold. The second was a child's doll, carved wood, or it had been. When the captain took it in his hands, he said it didn't feel like wood at all. It felt like compressed cloud, like if you pressed a fistful of fog between your palms until it held a shape. A little figure, button eyes, a painted smile blurred with age, light as a breath, cold as a cave. He wrote in the log, retrieved at 127 fathoms. No identifiable era. Feels like it's still wet on the inside. The third was a radio, console style from the 1930s, black with rot, its cloth speaker face the color of old teeth. The captain plugged it into his generator, and the dial lit amber. The needle swung. From that speaker, in the cold morning air on Oman Ridge, came a sound. Not music, not voices, a heartbeat, slow and deep and regular as a grandfather clock. He listened, then unplugged it. He wrote, alive or mimicking, cannot determine which. The fourth was the one that made the neighbors stop coming up to watch. The cable came up empty, or appeared to. The hook broke the fog line at the cliff edge with nothing on it, and the captain started winding it in. Then a woman named Bertie Colson said in a voice like she was afraid to startle something, "Captain, "Look at your shadow." The captain looked down. His shadow was there, long in the morning light, and beside it was another, the shape of a hound, big, deep-chested, sitting on its haunches right next to him. Nothing there to cast it. When Bertie took a step toward it, the captain held up his hand. "Don't make a quick move." He reached down slowly and rested his palm at the height a dog's head would have been. The shadow leaned into his hand. He wrote 4 words in the log. It was glad, released. He never told a soul what he felt against his palm. He took that with him. His name was Harlan Dillard, 22 years old. 4 days into looking for his father when somebody in the bottom sent him up the switchback road. His father, Webb Dillard, 58, a retired timber grader who'd lived in Creel's Gap his whole life, had gone out in a whiteout fog 4 mornings prior to check his trap line. Never came back. Search parties went in. Sheriff's department, neighbors, the boy himself. They found Webb's tracks in the mud at the tree line edge, and then the tracks just stopped. The way tracks stop when the ground turns to flat rock. Fog was still pooled in the low place beyond the tree line, even 4 days on. Heavy fog, pressed against the limestone like still water. Nobody wanted to walk into it. Harlan came up that road just before dusk and found the old man at his winch. Same as always. Cable down in the fog. Gears turning slow. The smell of wet coal and rust heavy on the air, mixed with the cold stone smell of deep fog, like the inside of a well. The boy told him about his father. The captain listened without looking up. When Harlan finished, there was a long silence. Long enough the boy thought the old man wasn't going to speak at all. Then, "I know where he is." The captain changed the cable depth, let it out yard by yard, counting under his breath in the old riverman's way, until he hit a point that made him go still, eyes closed, like a man listening for something just below the range of hearing. He locked the drum and began to haul back. The winch screamed, iron on iron, rust on rust. The sound bounced off the cliff face and came back doubled, and the boy covered his ears. The cable went taut as a banjo string. The limestone shelf vibrated underfoot. The fog at the base of the cliff 200 feet below began to swirl. Not the way fog swirls in wind, but the way water moves when something large is rising through it. Then the shape appeared. It came up out of the fog like wet paper being peeled off a cold stone wall, rising slow and heavy, turning slightly in the gray air. The shape of a man, the shape of Webb Dillard, his size, his coat, his posture, but wrong. The way a photograph of a man is like a man and is not a man. The way a reflection in still dark water looks like a face and is not a face. Harlan grabbed the cliff edge railing and reached over as the shape rose to the level of the shelf. His hands found his father's shoulders and they pulled him over the edge and onto the limestone. And Harlan Dillard's hands told him the truth before his eyes did. Wet paper, cold limestone, the texture of something that had been pressed flat and was now, only now, trying to remember its shape. Skin didn't feel like skin. It felt like rock pulled fresh from a cold creek, gritty and damp and alive the way moss on a stone is alive. Not animal alive, not warm alive, but alive in some slower, older register that the body don't have good words for. The captain worked quickly. He had a wool blanket, dry, smelling of cedar and wood smoke, and he wrapped it around Webb Dillard and spoke in a low voice. Not words Harlan could make out. Old river talk. The kind of language you use when something needs coaxing back to where it belongs. It took about an hour. Color came back slow. Warmth came back slower. Webb blinked. Once, twice, and looked at his son. His face did the thing faces do when a person remembers who they are. Not a smile, more like a loosening. A man letting go of a grip he'd been keeping a long, long time. He never remembered the 4 days. Said it felt like standing in a dark, quiet room, waiting for somebody to open the door. Said it wasn't painful. Said it wasn't frightening. Said it wasn't entirely unpeaceful. That part worried the captain more than anything else, because the fog, the deep pools, they don't hold things through violence or malice. They hold things the way deep, cold water holds things. Gently, passively, in a silence that, after a while, starts to feel like rest. And some things, once they've rested that long in the cold and the quiet and the white, have a hard time wanting to come back to the noise and the warmth and the trouble of being alive. The captain watched Webb Dillard walk down the switchback road with his son until the trees swallowed them. Then he turned back to his winch, let the cable back down into the fog. There were more things to retrieve. There always are. That's case file 084. The Fog Dredger of Ullman Ridge. Captain Pruitt worked that winch for 11 more years after the night Harlan Dillard came up that road. His log runs to 4 volumes. I'll share more of it when the time is right, when the fog is running heavy, and you're settled in the way you're settled in right now. If your screen is showing a playlist called All Night Horror, No Ads, let it run. I put those files together for nights exactly like this one. For when you need the voice to keep going after your eyes close. Let the archive sit with you tonight, neighbor. You don't have to listen alone. This has been Redacted Archives. Case file 084 is closed. For now.